Okay, today we are finally done with most of the old Constitution history stuff, and we finally get to take a look at some new modern political situations. We're going to be looking at federalism for a few days here. So, today we're going to be talking about federalism, the system of power sharing between the national government and states in the United States. What we want to be able to accomplish today is we want to classify different areas of policy as national areas of policy or state areas of policy, and that way we will be able to explain the division of powers system that was created in the Constitution and particularly in the 10th Amendment. And we will be able to discuss whether or not federalism is a good form of government for the United States. First thing we want to dive into today is figure out exactly what federalism means and try to evaluate federalism. Try to look at some of the good sides of using federalism and some of the downsides of using federalism in the United States. First off, let's answer that basic question. What exactly is federalism? So, federalism is a form of government used by a variety of countries around the world. This is a system of government that sets up some power sharing between a large central government and several smaller local or regional governments. And inside the United States, what that translates into is we have a government called the United States of America. It's headquartered in Washington, D.C. It's made up of the President, Congress, and the Supreme Court, and the federal bureaucracy spread throughout the country, and all that makes up the national government. And simultaneously, we have 50 different regional governments that we call states here. States like Tennessee have their own government and they exercise similar control in the same territory. And so what happens is the territory in the United States is governed by two different governments, a national government, the United States of America, and a state government, which serves as the regional government. And in the United States, the national government's main job is to coordinate policies between all the 50 states. Most of the national government powers are about foreign policy and economic policy. That would be areas of policymaking where we want a lot of coordination across all our 50 different regional governments. And at the same time, those 50 different regional governments have a little bit of freedom and flexibility to make policies that reflect what their people want. So we have two levels of government here in the United States, a large central government, meaning the national government for us, the United States of America, and smaller regional governments, in our case being the 50 states. And those two levels of governments share power in the same territory. Let's explore a little bit about why we use federalism here in the United States. And one of the main reasons that we do that is that federalism works really well when a country has a large amount of territory. Some of the other countries in the world that use federalism would be Russia and Canada, the only two countries in the world that are larger than the United States. Having a national government to focus on big things that need to be coordinated in a way that we can compete on a global stage, like foreign policy and economics, is really important. But the state governments serve to help the big national government better serve and control their populations that are spread so far, far away. So allows Maine to have different sets of policies than Hawaii and things like that. This will allow the states to make choices that are best for the people there. The other reason that we have federalism is that this was a reaction to what we were learning about the last few days, the failures of the Articles of Confederation. So the original plan was just let's have these very small states be basically functional independent governments, and they'll work together when they need to fight a war. But Shays' Rebellion showed us that that's not an effective form of policy, and so They couldn't solve real simple problems under the Articles of Confederation. They needed a stronger central government to better serve all those different state populations. And so here we are. Now we have two levels of government. We have all those state governments, but we also have a large central government to oversee those. The attempt at using Confederation as a form of government was just not functional. The country was vulnerable. Like if they couldn't solve a small problem in Massachusetts, they were not going to be able to deal with larger national threats. The government was poor. They couldn't tax the states, couldn't raise money for the programs that the national government needed, and it was pretty powerless to coordinate economic policymaking. So the United States was not going to be competitive on a worldwide scale with that old form of government. And another reason that we use federalism is because people tend to like this. People want to be able to like have some impact on their government officials, and that is most likely to happen at the local level. So the national government deals with big picture stuff that doesn't really affect your day-to-day life a whole lot, but the local governments are able to deal with what we would call kitchen table issues. Like, what are the things that families discuss at dinner time? They're most likely going to be those policies that actually impact your life, which seem minor but have more of a direct effect on you. And this honestly is like, maintaining roads, dealing with potholes and speed limits and things like that. That will have a direct impact on your day-to-day life. And this allows you to have more access and more ability to influence your local leaders. Let's look at some of the advantages of using federalism as a form of government. The first of these, this is really the biggest thing here, is that the local governments are best suited to meet the needs of the local citizens. So we're going to find all sorts of examples of this over the course of the next few days as we look through this. But think about, one of the obvious examples that you've read about already would be like marijuana laws. In some states, people want marijuana to be a legal product that's sold in stores. In other states, they don't. And federalism allows this flexibility where some areas of the country can choose to do that and other countries can choose an opposite policy approach. So we see this in all sorts of ways. Obviously, states like Alaska and Montana, North and South Dakota, these like kind of larger, mostly empty states, don't have the same needs as densely populated states like California and New York and Florida. And so like those states are able to make the policies that better suit their citizens. We'll talk about some examples like speed limits. A place like Montana, they don't need very small speed. Another great thing about federalism is this gives people more opportunities to participate in the government. If you're trying to influence the president or Congress or the Supreme Court, you're going to find that to be pretty frustrating. You're not going to have a lot of opportunities to interact with those people, and outside of voting, you don't have a lot of opportunity to really have a huge effect on what they do. But at the local level, you can get involved in a variety of ways, and you're able to make more of a difference in the local level. So we'll see people locally, like, first of all, it just is more offices. So we have local people here running for offices like school board and city council and state legislature and things like that, but people are able to get involved thinking about issues that they care about more. So in the last few years on a local level, we've had people organizing to try to change the way that parking is dealt with in Overton Park for the zoo, and things like that. We have a lot of people getting involved locally, trying to make changes to Tom Lee Park downtown, or to make sure that the mayor doesn't make changes. So people get involved with these issues that they care about more on a local level. One of the best features of federalism is that it allows states to experiment with policy solutions. And when a state has a really successful policy, that policy can be adopted nationally. We like to call this idea that states are laboratories of democracy. And so in this federal system in the United States, at least, we basically have 50 different state governments that are trying to solve the same problems, dealing with poverty and healthcare and education, all these different kinds of things. And so when a state tries something new, If it's very successful, then other states can copy that and adopt it. The national government might even copy it as a national policy. If it's unsuccessful, it was pretty contained and it didn't hurt the entire population and all this kind of stuff. So we see this in experiments with marijuana policy. That's a really easy way to see how the experiment works. So, if Colorado legalizes marijuana, we can take a look at the good things that happened, all the money that the state made, how they could improve schools and things. We can also look at the negative impacts. So we might look at addiction problems and things like that. And the other states can use that example to see if they want to implement that policy in their own state or if they want to change some things about it. So, this idea that states can experiment with policies is really useful for our government. Another good thing here is that states can serve as a check on the actions of the national government. So, when the people of a state disagree with the priorities of the national government, they can act in a different way, and that can be beneficial. For example, President Trump decided that he did not think the United States needed to be in a global climate agreement. So we were in this global agreement called the Paris Accords, where all these countries agreed to try to reduce their pollution so that we could try to slow down the impacts of climate change. So President Trump pulled the United States out of that, and a lot of people were unhappy. But there's not much you can do to impact what the president does. So some other states, like California and New York, even though they are not officially a part of this global agreement, what they said was, uh, President Trump has pulled us out of the agreement, but we're still going to abide by the rules of the agreement locally. So, if President Trump pulled out of this agreement to reduce pollution, California and New York can reduce pollution anyways. And in this way, they serve as a check on the power of the president. And so this is useful for the people of those states where they have a different set of priorities than what the national government does. There's also some pretty big disadvantages to using federalism as a form of government. And so the one of the first ones here is that the national government and the states might have policies that conflict with each other. And so an obvious example here, we're going to go back to marijuana policy. There are several states now that have legalized marijuana in their state. They run, little legal businesses just like selling any other good. But there's a problem. Marijuana is illegal in the United States of America. So there is some confusion here. If you are in a state like Colorado with legal marijuana, uh, the like your business that you're running is legal in your state, but it is technically an illegal business in the United States. So a person running a business there is operating their business with great risk. They're operating their business because they know Colorado is not going to arrest them and seize their property, but they do not know that the United States at any point could decide to enforce marijuana laws and could seize their businesses as part of illegal drug trade here in the United States. So it is confusing, and when there's conflicting policies, that causes problems for the people. That's not the only way that federalism is confusing, but your average person in the public does not have a real strong concept of what is left up to the national government and what's up to states. So people don't necessarily know which level of government is out there to solve their problems. Over the summer, when we're thinking about coronavirus policies, if the national government is sending a message that it's important that we open our businesses, open our schools, that masks aren't that important, but the local governments are saying something else, that's sending real confusing messages to the public. Another disadvantage of federalism is that the states might be slow to adopt the changes that the national government wants them to make. And a great example here would be the state reaction to the 1954 court decision Brown versus the Board of Education. So in 1954, the national government told all the states, you have to go out and desegregate your schools. You have to have integrated schools. And the states, particularly those states in the South, did not implement those changes in 1954. They went about it slowly. They tried to refuse to do it and stuff. And so, in many areas across the South, and not just the South, but in different parts of the country, we have schools that are still operating segregated school systems into the middle of the 1960s. That would be true around here in Memphis. So that's a real problem when the states can slow down what the national government wants to do. And thinking about schools brings us to our last big disadvantage here is when the states have the freedom to operate these different areas of policy however they want, states might have different priorities, and that might result in different levels of services. So, particularly think about education, right? It's up to the states to run school systems. And if your state thinks that education is the most important role that it provides, then they'll invest a lot of money in that. They'll have great school systems, really well funded school districts, and things like that. Other states might make the opposite choice. And then you, as a student, you are at the mercy of the local government in which your parents have decided to live in. So there are not like even school funding across the country. You might be living in a state where there's like less funding per student than in other states. And in that way, you are not getting the same amount of service that you could under a different state government. Federalism is in many ways, it's a good form of government for the United States, particularly because of the big space that the United States has to control, and also because of the flexibility that it provides to all the different people in the country in different places. But it also has its problems, and it can be a confusing form of government for the public to deal with.